Geiger Investments presents the Retirement Focus Academy with Kevin Geiger. There are many pieces to the modern retirement puzzle. This show talks about those pieces of retirement and the tools used to help the retired and soon to be retired toward their lifetime goals. Welcome. The Academy is on the air.
Welcome to the Retirement Focus Academy, powered by Geiger Investments and Kevin Geiger. You can find out more on their website, GeigerInvestments.com, G-E-I-G-E-R, GeigerInvestments.com. Kevin talks about something today on the program that you've got questions about. How does that pertain to me in my particular situation? Great opportunity for you to call the team. It is 843-375-8700. You can go in person. You can do Zoom. You can just do a phone call. There's a lot of options. The team's here to help. They just don't know if they can help you until they hear your situation. 843-375-8700. And then if you're maybe, let's say you're 5 to 8 years out from retirement, 5 to 10 years out from retirement. You're like, I don't know if I really need to sit down with Kevin yet. Well, it'd be a great time to do it, but it's also a great time to go to the Retirement Focus Academy. A lot of different workshops on there, and they're about topics all related to retirement, and they can help you maybe understand some pieces maybe that you don't quite grasp the way you want to. And it's always free of charge to you, retirementfocusacademy.com. retirementfocusacademy.com. It's the non-for-profit that Kevin and Lauren started back in 2019. A lot of different topics, obviously, and there's no cost ever to you. All right, so we're going to talk about today on the program, we always talk retirement. I think that's fair to say. Are you with me on that? We do talk retirement?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, isn't that the most important thing in life is planning for retirement and doing all the right things?
So how important is it to do things in a timely manner when it comes to planning our retirement? And how do we even know the time that we should be planning for our retirement?
Well, that's a big piece of the puzzle, right? If you're within 5 years of retirement right now, you need to be listening. You need to be saying, okay, I'm gonna put down what I'm doing. I'm gonna listen to Kevin and go, okay, what do I got to be doing? I thought I had 5 years to figure this out. Well, here's the deal. You're 5 years or closer to retirement right now. You've got to start thinking about things. You've got to start putting that budget together. You got to get a clear picture of how your retirement is going to be. And not only just about you, you got to make sure that you're on the same page with your spouse. All too often, we have the spouses come in together, and he has his ideas. He's going to go play golf, and he's going to have a simple life and do that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, she wants to go travel. She wants to go see the grandchildren, spoil them, do all that kind of stuff. And let's say when you spoil the grandchildren, it's going to cost a few more dollars, and I guarantee you think it's going to cost because you're doing things for all that kind of stuff. So you've got to have the whole plan in place, right? So you think about it. If you're still working right now, they're doing a project. Do they just kind of wing it? Or do they have a plan in place, right? They have a blueprint of their whole, project that they're going to do something with. They don't just build a whole neighborhood of, 1,000 houses and just wing it and say, well, I'll just stick it here. They have a plan in place. Well, that's the same way with your retirement. You've got to make sure that you've got something in place so you have a clear picture. It's like I would say this in our world, we call it the investment statement, right? You've got to have a retirement statement saying, this is how, we're going to do our retirement. We're both on the same page. She wants to do this. I want to do that. And now we're going to spill it out, what the expenses are going to be in our budget and really get a good picture of the stuff. And then from there, you've got to go and look at all your investments, making sure you're not taking too much risk when you're going a few years away from retirement, because the last thing you want to see happen in retirement is that you end up losing 20-30% of your money because we had a big market downturn just before you retired. I've seen it happen. In 2007, when we had our first, big market crash, if you want to call it, in a while, it was a big wake-up call for a lot of people that were too invested in the stock market, being 6 months, a year away from retirement, totally changed the way their retirement was going to go. So, treat the fact that if you're within 5 years away from retirement or sooner, you've got to start, taking chips off the table. You've got to start planning, and you got to start putting an income plan in place and all these little things that are out there and putting it all in place so you know that you have something in writing knowing what you're going to do when you get into retirement.
So these timelines, as we're planning for retirement, if we're, I don't know, a year out, 5 years out, I mean, are there things that we need to put into place as a planning tool, I guess, maybe?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So, I always tell people, this is the great time. If you're a few years away from retirement, especially 2 or 3 years away from retirement, if you're not working with someone at all, this is probably the number one time I always tell people this is the time when you want to start working with someone that's a retirement expert, right? Just not your stockbroker, one of the stockbroker companies and things like that. Not the ones you just call the number and you got some young kid across the phone that's giving you advice. This is probably a good time to start having someone look at your stuff and figuring out what's going to be the most tax efficient ways of going into retirement, planning your Social Security, making sure that we're doing all the right things to maximize your Social Security. It doesn't mean you just take it at 62 or take it full retirement. There might be ways of maximizing these plans because, in our world, in the retirement investment world, as I call it, we're looking to make sure we can find a way to maximize everything in your retirement. At the same time, we're making sure that we're covering all the things that you're not thinking about, like healthcare. Long-term care is a big piece of the puzzle that people think that is covered by Medicare. Newsflash, it doesn't. Long-term care is probably one of the things that people overlook the most in retirement because let's face it, they don't want to put money into these policies. Well, now they have policies out that you could take on that maybe it just costs like a monthly expense versus having to put a big chunk of money in there. So be open-minded to the idea that there's actually opportunity out there that can help cover that stuff because all too often, to me doing the last couple of decades, I've seen people always push it to the wayside. One of the spouses gets sick, goes 5, 6, 7 years in a nursing home and caring, and then they eventually unfortunately pass away. Well, guess what happens with the spouse? They're left with nothing because the accounts were exhausted because they had to pay all that money to care, and now their whole life changed. Not only did they lose their spouse, but now their financial situation is not sound anymore. So it's really important to understand that you have timelines. If you're a few years away from retirement, this is a good time to say maybe it's time to get some advice. Maybe it's time to hire someone that can actually put me in the right direction and make sure that we're even on track to even retire. I mean, too often we see people that come in, they think they're gun-ho, we're ready for retirement. We find out they're filled with debt. They don't have enough money saved, and I have to give them fortunate advice to say maybe you need to be working for another 5 or 10 years and really pay off this debt and save up and kind of put you in the right direction. But you won't know that unless you take the first steps.
And that first step would be just call the team at Geiger Investments, 843-375-8700. And certainly those are not fun meetings where, you probably need to work a little bit longer. But that's probably, I'd rather know that than retire and then have to go find a job in a couple years. 843-375-8700. And, of course, it works the other way. Kevin, do you think I'm ever going to be able to retire? Hey, you've done a wonderful job. You could have retired 5 years ago. Well, that would be nice news as well. 843-375-8700. We're going to spend the rest of the program talking about some risks that retirees face, and that's sequence risk, longevity risk, and behavioral risk. So we're going to take each one of these individually, and the sequence risk, and that's kind of the sequence of returns risk. Would you explain what is a sequence risk and why, as a retiree, we should even pay attention to it?
I call it the bad luck risk.
Bad luck. You retired and the market's all crashed and all your money was in the market. Sorry.
Exactly. So, let's give you a quick example of this. So let's just say you were the lucky guy who retired in 2010, right? And the market just roared for the next 10 years. Wonderful. Good for you. Everything worked out wonderful for you. But let's say you're at the other end of the spectrum and you just happen to invest and all of a sudden the markets end up going down, for the next 4 or 5 years. Versus going down towards the end of maybe the 15 years. So let's just put this perspective, right? So you put $100,000 in, you're taking 5% out, which is $5,000, right? And the market did really well in the beginning and then got bad at the last, 5 years, right? Well, in this scenario, you would have about $106,000 left, right? With an average of, a 4% return. But let's just say you average a 4% return, but the markets were bad for the first 5 years of retirement, and you're still drawing $5,000 out. Well, now you only have about $35,000 left over. So a sequence of returns is a huge piece of the puzzle that all too often people just don't even think about. They go, well, yeah, I can have a couple bad years, but what if you had 4 or 5 bad years? Even though you averaged a 4% return across the board, you still are going to be in bad shape. Imagine in 15 years, your $100,000 is worth $35,000. That's going to change in the dynamic of how your retirement's going to go going forward. So don't plan on the idea that you're just going to magically have that magic ball. It's going to pick, the perfect timing, retiring in 2010, and you have a nice 10-year bull market, if you want to call it, that you did really well. Plan for the idea there's a good chance that might not happen. I'm not a risk taker by any means. So for me, I always assume the worst, right? So if you're assuming the best, you're not doing the right justice to yourself. You got to plan for the worst, assume for the worst, and do what you need to be doing. So then the sequence of return risk is kind of out of play, if you want to call it, going forward.
So if you retire in 1990, or you retire in 2010, because the next 10 years are great in the markets, you whatever money you took out, it doesn't matter. You still have more than what you started with. If you retire in 2000 and you go to the lost decade with the dot-com bubble bursting, 9/11, the housing, banking, financial crisis, 07, 09, now you've got issues. And it's really weird how this plays out, because there's a lot of scenarios, and if you come in and sit down with Kevin and the team, they can even show you, here's the deal if the markets go bad, where you would be in 10 years, and if the markets go well, here's where you could be. And that's the idea, why you don't want all your money in the insurance world, or all of your money in the banking world, or all of your money in the investment world. That's where diversification comes in. So can you give us an example, I guess, of how all this plays out? Because there's got to be a way to prevent some of this sequence of returns risk. And is it just diversification? Is that kind of the way?
Yeah, it is, but it's not the diversification that you might think of, right? So people go, oh yeah, well I am diversified. I've got 7 different mutual funds, and I'm diversified. But the problem is that's always going to be at risk with the market, right? So no matter what the market does, your whole account could go up or down. You got to start taking advantage of all these other tools. I always say, in our world, in the investment world today, we have more tools in our toolbox than we've ever had before. And there's other ways that maybe you can take that other, put 60% into the market or 50% in the market, and maybe you take the other 40 or 50% and you put it into more of a protective growth strategy. There's investments options and tools out there that can actually do that. So at least we can kind of reduce some of that risk inside your portfolio, because if you're putting all your eggs in one basket, meaning you're putting all in the investment world completely, your mutual funds, ETFs, you name it, you're taking a lot of risk, and you don't have to anymore. There's so many better options out there to eliminate as much of the risk as you can possibly take, depending on how much you want to go in different directions, and that it can totally change the sequence of return issue that you might have to worry about. Because, again, plan for the idea that you're going to have 4 or 5 years of a bad market. We have no idea what the future is going to bring right now. We have so many things going on in the world, in this country alone, that anything could change at a minute's notice. So if you can plan for that and use the tools that are available out there, it'll change your dynamic of your retirement going forward.
Yeah, so if you think about it, if you go, well, you know what, I don't really want any risk, I'm just going to put my money in the bank. Well, you're losing money safely because you're not even keeping up with inflation. So there is the banking world, there's the insurance world, there's the investment world, and it's really about kind of the blending of the three for most of us. If you have a ton of money, you could just put it in the banking world. You don't even care about the 1% interest you might gain on that. But if you really need to grow your money, you have to do it in a wise way. And when you retire, we can't control the markets. And Kevin's not going to guarantee you, hey, this is a perfect time to retire. I guarantee you the markets are great for the next 10 years. Your sequence of returns risk is nothing. Well, that's not how this works, right? There are no guarantees. It's about the plan. What happens if? What happens if that happens? What if this happens? What if my wife passes away early? What if I pass away early? How's she going to be for the next 20, 30 years? There's a lot of moving parts here, and there's a lot of risk going into retirement. And the idea is that you get to enjoy retirement. We don't want you, being bundled up and can't sleep because stress is overwhelming you. We want you to have a plan in place where you feel good. And if the markets do this, that's okay. We've got a plan for that. And obviously, if a spouse gets sick, we've got a plan for that. There's just a lot of things that can happen. We understand that. That's how life works. If you would like to get this whole thing started, hey, I need a plan. I'm not sure my plan's taking care of all these what ifs. 843-375-8700. 843-375-8700. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about longevity risk and behavioral risk, and then what are our options to handle all of this risk in retirement. Again, the number 843-375-8700. Back with more with Kevin Geiger. This is the Retirement Focus Academy, powered by Geiger Investments.
You know what you want to do in retirement, but do you know how to get there? Get the retirement planning information you need by joining Kevin Geiger of Geiger Investments for the Retirement Focus Academy. What's the best way for you to take Social Security? When can you sign up for Medicare, and what does it actually cover? What and is there a way to lower your tax bill? These and much more will be discussed. To enroll in an upcoming virtual Retirement Focus Academy course, visit retirementfocusacademy.com or call 843-790-9293. Plan today so you can do the things you've dreamt about doing in retirement. Sign up for the Retirement Focus Academy with Kevin Geiger of Geiger Investments at retirementfocusacademy.com or call 843-790-9293. Advisory services offered through Black Ridge Asset Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Securities offered through Peak Brokerage Services, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Black Ridge Asset Management, LLC, and Geiger Investments are separate and independent entities from Peak Brokerage Services, LLC. Our firm is not affiliated with the U.S. government.
You're listening to the Retirement Focus Academy with Kevin Geiger, powered by Geiger Investments. 843-375-8700.
So we talked about the sequence of returns risk, meaning that the markets go down right when you retire. It's going to make it very difficult if all your money's in the market to have your money last as long as you do, obviously. There's a couple other risks you wanted to talk about today, longevity risk and behavioral risk. So let's talk about longevity risk. I would think that longevity, the longer we're here, the more of all of the other risks we're going to see, right?
Yeah, longevity risk, I think, is a huge thing that I think we need to be thinking more about now going into retirement. The reality is healthcare is getting better. People are living longer, right? So, you got to anticipate the fact that you're going to live into your 90s, at this point. So you've got to be planning for that. Don't just assume, I'm probably not going to be here. Because I see this too often. People come like, well, I'll be gone by, early 80s. And next thing you know, just from experience with clients, here they are in their 90s. I've got plenty of clients in their 90s.
And I think there was a study done by some firm that said that people typically are cutting themselves short in the time they'll be here by 5 to 10 years.
Oh yeah, I believe that. And I mean, I have a client right now that she's turning 100 later this year, so 100 years old. But I have a lot of other clients that are in their 90s, early to even close to mid 90s now. So you better understand that there's a good chance you might outlive that. So you got to do some planning with that. Well, that doesn't mean that you take more risk in the market because you got to build more money up, because that's just not the right approach with this. You've got to understand that there is longevity risk of the idea that you're going to have to plan for retirement that might even be longer than your working years. So that's a big piece of the puzzle. You could retire at 60, for example, and there's a good chance you might have to plan for 40 years of making that money last. So these are things that you got to have in the back of your mind, but you've got to put a plan in place, right? We always keep talking about plan. But that is a big piece of everything. No project ever gets done without a plan. Well, that's the same thing with your retirement. You've got to have a retirement plan in place that you're going to follow. You're going to have your investments set up a certain way to provide those, reliable income sources for yourself. You're going to have your, investments in different places where it's not going to be too risky, but at the same time, you're not going to lose out an opportunity. That doesn't mean just sticking all your money in the CDs, the banks, because let's face it, you're not making any money there. It might be safe, but it's not the best option out there. There's better places that would actually help you make more money on your money. But then you've got to also factor in healthcare. Healthcare is a big piece of this, right? Because now if you're going to live longer, there's a chance you're going to have more health issues through those years. So you better have something in place to make sure that you're covering your health needs into retirement. Because if you're not covering all these things, you're not doing justice for yourself, let alone for your spouse, to making sure that the money that you work so hard to save over these years is going to outlast you. That is the number one key to this thing, is making sure your money outlives you. That's the biggest key to being successful in retirement.
So there are three really big risks to retirement: the sequence of returns risk, longevity risk, and then the third one you wanted to talk about is behavioral risk. Is that spender, saver, or my granddad left me a stock and he really wanted me to keep this stock forever when he actually just wanted to use that stock if he needed it for income maybe? I don't know. What's behavioral risk?
Behavioral risk is a bunch of different things, right? So behavioral risk can be maybe you're just you decided you're going to keep going your own way in retirement and you're going to keep managing your own investments. You go, I've done really well since the last 10 years. I can keep doing this. And maybe you're taking too much risk with your portfolio, right? Or, the other part of behavioral risk is talking about maybe you're just, spending more. You're doing a lot of stuff. You're not budgeting for anything. And next thing you know, you're outspending what you're even making every year in your investment accounts. So there's a lot of ways you got to understand the behavioral risk is a big piece to the puzzle. You have to go into, your retirement knowing that, you have something set up, you know exactly how your investments are going to play out, you know exactly this is how much I'm budgeting for my, my spending, and not only just for yourself, but for your spouse. Make sure that you fully understand what both of your needs are going to be and what your wants are going to be in retirement, whether it's going to be traveling, spending money on the grandchildren, doing all those kind of fun things, right? Making sure you have that in place, so then the behavioral risk of side of things doesn't play into that retirement. Because I can tell you, if you're taking too much risk in the market, or you were like a lot of people, they pulled all their money out last year when the pandemic hit, and just never got back in. And all of a sudden here we are with a roaring market overall from the pandemic into this year. And that changed everything, right? And you just lost out on opportunities. I saw a lot of people do that in 2008. They sat on the sidelines for 2, 3, 4 years before they ever got back into it, and they lost opportunity. So I would say, the hard thing about investing is you get too emotional. And if you get too emotional in the whole thing, you're going to lose out on opportunity. So I always joke around. I go, our job is not only, figuring a way to optimize your retirement plan, but our job is also being like a psychologist worker. We're trying to keep your nerves calm and kind of lead you in the right direction of what needs to be done, so we can continue to find opportunity and growth when things are there. And at the same time, if we have a little hiccup in the market, knowing, is it the right time to pull out of the market, or is it maybe a good time to rebalance things and do different things? That's our job, and that's what's neat about what we do, because we've had years of experience. We know how to kind of, take advantage of opportunities, and at the same time, making sure we're doing the right things when things do get out of hand. But that's where behavioral risk is a really big piece to the puzzle that you've got to understand. If you're going to go on this on your own, you've got to understand that, and so it doesn't become a problem.
Well, here's the deal, though. There's a lot of companies I see that do Super Bowl commercials, for example. I've never seen Geiger Investments do a Super Bowl commercial. So there's a point of difference, isn't there, between, there's nothing wrong with the big companies. There's nothing wrong with it. They just look at, they're limited to the company they work with, to the tools that they have in their toolbox. Where, you go into their toolbox and, you go to a grocery store and there's 20 aisles. Maybe that brokerage house or that insurance company, they have 2 aisles. You're independent, so you can kind of go to all the aisles wherever your clients want to. I guess, what would be your point of difference for people that think, oh, I've heard of that company before, I should go with them because I see them on TV all the time, and yet you're more of a boutique firm here to help individuals and families create a retirement lifestyle, hopefully that you can, sustain it for as long as they are here. I mean, there's a difference, I think, between a company like Geiger Investments and those big companies that we hear about and see on TV.
Absolutely. Because you got to remember, sure, they're going to do your investments, and they say, hey, we got all the stuff in place, and we're going to be cheaper, we're going to be the robo-advisor and just be this great one free source. But there's no such thing as free in life, right? You're giving up something. And what you're giving up is you're giving up the ability to work with someone that is an expert in the field, and not working with this, 21-year-old on the other phone, that's trying to give you financial advice for your retirement, who has no clue what he's doing, right? So, when you're working with us, you're getting what you're supposed to be getting. You're getting expert advice. You're getting someone that's going to help you optimize your personal plan, because everyone's plan is going to be different. Everyone's situation's different. So we build every plan custom to everybody. And then on top of that, we're going to help you stay on track with that. We're not just going to give you advice when you call, an 800 number. You're going to call us, and we're going to keep you on track. We're going to follow up with you to see where you're at. We're going to constantly tweak and change things as you need to have things change, as well as when the tax codes change, because that's a big piece of the puzzle that people don't think about. Tax codes always change. Every time we have a new president, something changes with it, and it could be a good thing for you or it could be a bad thing. But how would you know if you don't have someone that's actually helping you out with that stuff? This is why it's important to work with a boutique office like ourselves. I mean, this is what we focus on. We focus on retirement because it's such a big piece to people's lives, that needs to be catered to, and it needs to be custom to everything that we do in our office is really built around making sure that we're doing the right things for you in retirement.
So you think about it. You have, Kevin has kids. I've got a daughter, and when my daughter, who's now 20, was young, she went to the pediatrics doctor, right? And then later on, got a little older, gets into high school. It's now the general practitioner, for example. Well, then, sadly, at 17, she had a car wreck, paralyzed from the waist down. Well, now she's going to see a whole lot of specialists, right, in the spinal cord world. and the rehabilitation world. And that's kind of how it works in our financial world. We can, when you're right out of college, you could just go Vanguard and just buy stocks and bonds and Bitcoin if you want, whatever, because you got a lot of time on your side. When you get to retirement, it's now about sitting down with somebody that actually works in the retirement world. That's Geiger Investments. So we've got a couple minutes left here. Talk a little bit about what people should expect if they call 843-375-8700 and they go, Kevin, I'd love to sit down with you and find out a little bit more about my situation. Am I okay? Do I need to tweak some things? What do you think? What happens when they call 843-375-8700?
That's the biggest piece to this whole thing, right? Really, it's the fear of the unknown. Well, let me tell you how our process works. We talked about this on the radio before, but I think it's important for all listeners to hear this. So you call in and say, hey, Kevin, I heard you on the radio. I think it's time for us to finally take these next steps, but I don't know what to expect. And so what I was telling them, I go, here's how it works. You're going to give me a little information on the phone so I get an idea about some stuff, and I always like to get to know people. I love to get to know people. I know everything about them on the personal side as much as I can and find areas I can relate as well on that side, because I think it's kind of neat to really bring people into our own family, if you want to call it. But then, from there, we send people to, a link. And this link is neat because it's just, take about 10 minutes to fill out this little questionnaire. It's going to ask some information. It's going to have some questions in there. And it's going to spawn some things that you might not have even realized or thought about and go, I didn't think about that area. And so when that comes to us, and you'll get a copy of this as well, when we sit down that first meeting, I always call it's the 1.5 meeting. It's not the first meeting. It's the meeting and a half, if you want to call it, because I already know some of the information. We're not having to waste time, and it helps me gauge where I need to go with that meeting. So when we sit down, I'm already kind of having an idea what needs to be done, but then we're talking about it in more detail and all that stuff. And then we go on, and from that point, you go, okay, this seems like the right direction. Let's go on to the second meeting. So then we set the second meeting up. And at that point, we put a plan in place, and I would say we do that plan in pencil, because we're going to tweak and change it based on how you like one direction or another, and then we're going to say, okay, this is the plan. This is the plan that's going to work for right now, and now let's find a way to execute this plan and put this plan in place. So by the time you're leaving that second meeting, you're feeling good knowing that you know the direction that you need to go, you have a plan in place, and you know that you have all the tools that are available at your fingertips. They're built into that plan to ensure that you're going to have that dependable, reliable income. The investments are as protected as they possibly can be, depending on where direction you want to go. And we're covering all the different areas to find ways of maximizing everything in your plan. And then from there, we're meeting, at least twice a year, going over all this stuff, and you're becoming a part of our family. We have all these events we put on for our clients, and gives you an opportunity to meet other people, a part of our Geiger investment family. That's what's so neat about working with us, is you become a part of our Geiger investment family. And that's the number one thing that I think that we bring as far as value across the board.
And even if you're not a part of the Geiger family at this point, you can always go to the retirementfocusacademy.com website and learn about different retirement topics. There's a lot of different workshops that Kevin and Lauren have created on the retirementfocusacademy.com website. There's never a charge to you. It's a great resource for you if you're nearing retirement or already in retirement. I want to learn a little bit more about certain areas. retirementfocusacademy.com. If you would like to sit down with the team, let's get started. Let's find out with some areas maybe that are weak, some areas that are strong. What do you need to do to put yourself in a better position? Hey, Kevin, when can I retire? Do I have enough? Will my money last as long as I do? Will my loved ones be okay if something happens to me? Those are all big questions, and the team at Geiger Investments are here to help you answer those questions. 843-375-8700. No cost, no obligation, no pressure for this. 843-375-8700. Great opportunity to call in is right now. Kevin, enjoyed it as always. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Have a great week. We'll do it again next week.
Sounds good, Mark, and take care, y'all.
This has been the Retirement Focus Academy with Kevin Geiger. Advisory services offered through Black Ridge Asset Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Peak Brokerage Services, LLC, member FINRA and SIPC. Black Ridge Asset Management, LLC, and Geiger Investments are separate and independent entities from Peak Brokerage Services, LLC. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This radio show is intended for informational purposes purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. Blackridge Asset Management LLC is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Blackridge Asset Management LLC. This radio show is a paid placement.